All right, back here again for video lecture number 3, and in this video we will be going over Punnett squares. So if you remember from the previous video, we went over what a dominant and recessive trait was. Dominant traits will show up if you have at least one copy of the allele. Recessive traits will show up only if you have both copies of the allele, of the recessive allele. We also talked about what homozygous alleles were and heterozygous alleles. Homozygous are two alleles that are the same, and heterozygous is two different alleles. And we also looked at this example of kittens and how what color of fur their offspring would have, and we were doing lines across to help determine what the alleles would be for each of the kittens. And we said that there is a much easier way to organize this information, and that's with using Punnett squares. So this is Reginald Punnett. He's the one who came up with the Punnett squares. And you can see the Punnett square here is a box with 4 other boxes in it. And you have one parent on top and the other parent on the side. Each parent is only able to donate half of their chromosomes because we have paired chromosomes ourselves, and the mother has chromosomes from her mother and her father. Those will be split, and same goes for the father here. And so we each have 2 alleles, and the gametes here are only able to donate half of that allele, which is how we get variation in the future, in the next offspring or in the next generation. Okay, so we're able to easily display what the mother donates, what the father donates, and what is the probability of each trait being displayed. So I'm going to run through some scenarios with you guys. I'll do the first one with you, and then for the next 3 after, you can pause the video after I give the scenario, fill out the Punnett squares yourself, and then come back and we'll go over them together. So we're going to be looking at eye color, only 2 eye colors, brown and blue. And we're going to say that the dominant allele is the brown eyes and the recessive allele is the blue eyes. And we represent the dominant allele by using a big letter B and the recessive allele using a little letter b. So we put parent 1 on the top and parent 2 on the side. Now, in this first scenario, parent number 1 has homozygous recessive alleles, and parent number 2 has homozygous dominant alleles. Homozygous meaning same alleles. And so for parent number 1, they have the recessive alleles, and both of them are the same. So we put 2 little b's at the top. Parent number 2 has homozygous dominant alleles, and we represent dominant with 2 big B's, and so we put 2 big B's on the side for parent number 2. Now, when we're filling this out, each parent donates the allele that it corresponds to in each box. So parent number 1 donates the recessive allele, parent number 2 donates the dominant allele. And this offspring would have then heterozygous alleles. Same thing here for the second case. Parent number 1 donates the recessive allele, parent number 2 donates the dominant allele. The offspring would be heterozygous with their alleles. And we do the same thing in all 4 squares. So looking at the offspring, for each of the 4 cases, all the offspring were heterozygous. So there's 4 out of 4, 100% were heterozygous. Therefore, all the offspring will have brown eyes. And that's because there is a dominant allele present in all scenarios, and it only takes 1 dominant allele for that trait to be displayed. Okay. So if these 2 parents had a child, no matter what, they would have a child with brown eyes. Okay, for this second scenario, we're still looking at the same traits, brown and blue eyes, dominant being represented by the big B, recessive being represented by the little b. Parent 1 on top, parent 2 on the side. For the second scenario, parent number 1 is heterozygous and parent number 2 is homozygous dominant. So for parent number 1, we have the heterozygous alleles put on top, and parent number 2, homozygous meaning the same, and it's the dominant allele, so we put 2 big B's on the side. Pause the video here and fill out the Punnett square yourself. Okay, so going through it, for the first case here, parent number 1 donates the big B allele, parent number 2 donates the big B allele. This offspring would be homozygous dominant. In this case, we see big B and little b, parent number 1 donating the recessive, parent number 2 donating the dominant. Same thing for the third case and the last case. So we see for the offspring, there are 2 cases where the offspring would have homozygous dominant alleles and 2 cases where the offspring would have heterozygous alleles. So there is a 50% chance that the offspring would be homozygous dominant, 50% chance that the offspring would be heterozygous. However, they would all have brown eyes, and that's because the dominant allele is present in all 4 cases. Scenario number 3, parent 1, parent 2. Third scenario, so parent number 1 is heterozygous. Parent number 2 is homozygous recessive. So pause the video and fill out the chart yourself. All right. So for parent number 1, heterozygous, we put the 2 different alleles on the top, the big B and the little b. Parent number 2 is homozygous recessive. We put both the recessive alleles on the left. Filling out the square, we have the first case would be heterozygous. The second case would be homozygous recessive. We would have the third case be heterozygous again, and the fourth case be homozygous recessive. So looking at the offspring, 2 out of 4 of the cases, so 50%, have heterozygous alleles, and 2 out of 4 have the homozygous recessive alleles. So with that in mind, 50% would have brown eyes and 50% would have blue eyes. That is because for 2 out of the 4 cases have a dominant allele present, and so that means the dominant trait would be represented. And 2 out of 4, we have both of the recessive alleles being displayed. In order for the recessive trait to be displayed, that means you need both the alleles to be recessive. And so if these 2 parents had a child, there is a 50% chance that the offspring would have brown eyes and 50% chance that they would have blue eyes. And for the final scenario here, parent number 1 is heterozygous and parent number 2 is heterozygous. So pause the video here and fill out the Punnett square. Okay, for this scenario then we put the heterozygous alleles for parent 1 and heterozygous alleles for parent number 2. And we fill out our Punnett square. This one, this first case here would be homozygous dominant. This second and third case here would be heterozygous. And the fourth case here would be homozygous recessive. So in 3, actually, let's go through it first. So 25%, there's a 25% chance that the offspring would be homozygous dominant, a 50% chance that the offspring could be heterozygous, and a 25% chance that the offspring would be homozygous recessive. Adding these all together, we would see that there's a 75% chance that the offspring would have brown eyes and a 25% chance that the offspring would have blue eyes. Now, thinking about how traits can skip a generation. We're going to look at a similar scenario here where we have our 2 parents. One parent is homozygous dominant and the other parent is homozygous recessive. We fill out the Punnett square and we see that all offspring will be heterozygous and display the dominant trait. Now, if offspring from this generation here were to breed, we would fill out the Punnett square the same way, but we will notice that both the parents in this scenario are heterozygous. So when we fill out the Punnett square, we see that there is a 25% chance that one of the offspring will have the recessive trait of white fur. And when we see all this put together here, this is how traits can skip a generation. So maybe your grandparents have a trait that you have, but your parents don't share that trait. That is because alleles can skip a generation based on which trait is dominant and recessive. All right, so that's it for this video. In the next video, we will be covering mitosis and meiosis, which is cell division. Thanks, and please let us know if you have any questions.